a lot of young women dream of being featured on Vogue. For me to be given this opportunity is incredibly exciting.
A photograph was taken in Madrid, and nobody in that room knew they were looking at a contract. A magazine that had survived 180 years of duchesses and debutantes pointed a camera at a 20-year-old who had never won a title, never reached a slam quarterfinal, never cracked the top 50, and somebody at that magazine decided she belonged on the cover anyway. Why would one of the oldest society publications in America bet its name on a player nobody outside tennis had heard of? What did they see that the rankings couldn't show? And what happens to a person when a magazine tells the world she's already a star before she's proven it? Hold on to that, because by the end of this you'll understand exactly why that photograph stopped being a gamble and started being something closer to a prophecy. Picture her for a second, not as a name on a bracket, but as a girl standing under Madrid light in an oversized denim shirt and a tilted straw hat, a photographer named Miguel Rego, adjusting his frame around her like he's trying to capture something he can't quite name yet. Her name is Alex. She's 20 years old. She's from the Philippines. And in that exact moment, frozen on film, she has no idea that this image is about to become the most quietly controversial decision in the history of a magazine called Town & Country. You need to understand something about this publication before we go further, because without it, nothing that follows will hit the way it should. Town & Country was founded in 1846. It has spent nearly 2 centuries chronicling royals, heiresses, philanthropists, the kind of people who exist several rooms removed from where the rest of us stand. It is not a sports outlet. It does not chase athletes. And in all those years, in all those covers, it had never once placed a tennis player on its digital front page. Not one. Until August 19, 2025. And when the silence finally broke, it didn't break for a Grand Slam champion. It broke for Alex. Here's where the first crack of tension opens up. Because if you know anything about how lifestyle magazines operate, you know there's an unwritten rule, an industry instinct so consistent it might as well be law. You wait. You wait for the trophy, the final, the headline that makes the gamble safe. Sloane Stephens didn't get her Vogue moment until she'd already lifted a US Open trophy. Coco Gauff's lifestyle features arrived only after she'd already broken through on the biggest stage tennis offers. Naomi Osaka's covers came stacked behind slam titles, never before them. That's the formula. That's the safety net every editor relies on, because a cover is expensive, it's permanent, it's printed before the story finishes writing itself, and if the subject doesn't deliver, the magazine looks foolish in front of its entire readership. So picture the room where this decision actually got made. A 20-year-old with a junior pedigree, some training time at Rafael Nadal's academy in Mallorca, a decent spring season that got her onto a few radars, but nothing close to stardom. And somebody in that room looked at all of that and said, her, not a champion, not a finalist, her. Why? That question is the engine of everything that follows, because either that decision was reckless, or it was the smartest read on a rising star that anyone in the industry made all year. And the only way to know which one it was is to follow what happened next, because the calendar didn't stop just because the photograph was taken. 10 months started ticking the second that cover went live. And every single week of those 10 months was either going to make that magazine look like visionaries, or make them look like they'd wasted a feature on a player who flamed out before the ink dried. Sit with that tension for a second, because that's the exact knife edge this story balances on for the next several months, and it does not resolve quickly. The first signal came in March 9th, 2026, Indian Wells, a stadium court under California light, and Alex walks out not as a name in a magazine spread, but as a competitor with something to prove. She reaches the round of 16. She becomes the first Filipina to ever do that at that tournament. Town & Country doesn't let that moment pass quietly either. They run a follow-up piece, which tells you something important. This wasn't a one-time bet they placed and forgot about. This was a magazine actively watching its own gamble unfold in real time, checking the stock price, so to speak, on a story they'd already committed to in print. But here's the thing about a round of 16 finish. It's good. It's promising. It is absolutely not proof. It's the kind of result that lets a skeptic keep their arms crossed and say, let's see more. So the tension doesn't break. It tightens. Because the next stop on her calendar is grass, a surface that's historically punished players who didn't grow up on it. A surface where careers stall instead of launch. And she walks into Eastbourne and somehow finds her way to a final. Another step. Another data point in the magazine's favor. But still, a final isn't a trophy. A final is the agonizing, almost but not quite chapter that athletes hate more than losing outright, because it means you were right there and it still slipped through your fingers. So picture the pressure compounding now, round by round, tournament by tournament. The cover from 10 months earlier sitting in an archive somewhere, just waiting to be vindicated or exposed. And then June 7th arrives. Edgbaston Priory, the Birmingham Open, grass courts gleaming under an English sky, and Alex is in the final again, except this time something different happens early. She drops the first set to Nicola Bartunova. And if you've ever watched sports build toward a moment, you know exactly what a dropped first set does to the tension in a match like this. It doesn't kill the story. It injects doubt right when doubt is the most dangerous thing in the world for a player chasing her first title. The crowd doesn't know yet which version of this story they're about to witness. Neither do we, but she comes back. She wins the second set, she wins the third, she wins the title, her first WTA singles title, her first ever on grass, a surface she had never won on at the professional level before that exact afternoon. Her ranking climbs to number 33, a career high, and somewhere inside the Hearst building, that photograph from a Madrid afternoon 10 months earlier stops looking like a risky bet and starts reading like something closer to foresight. But before you let yourself settle into the warm, satisfying glow of a redemption arc, I need you to remember something Alex said back in that very first cover story, back when none of this had happened yet, back when she was just a 20-year-old being photographed in a denim shirt with no trophies to her name. She told the magazine's writer this: "The only thing I can give back to my country is to inspire." Read that sentence in August of 2025, and it sounds like hope. It sounds like a young athlete saying something aspirational, because that's what young athletes are supposed to say to magazines. But read that exact same sentence now, after Indian Wells, after Eastbourne, after Birmingham, after a flood of Filipino fans filling her Instagram comments, after national outlets back home treating her not as a sports footnote, but as a cultural milestone. And that sentence stops being aspiration. It becomes something closer to a promise she's already started keeping. The words never changed. Everything around them did. That's the kind of detail that should genuinely unsettle you a little, because it means the cover didn't just capture a photograph, it accidentally captured a prediction nobody could have proven true at the time. And just when you think this story is ready to coast into a clean, triumphant ending, it refuses to give you that comfort. 3 days after lifting the Birmingham trophy, Alex walks onto a court at the Queen's Club Championships in London. Round of 16. Her opponent is the American player Eva Jovic, and in straight sets, 6-2, 6-2, the run ends. A 6-match grass winning streak, gone in roughly an hour. No dramatic third set, no comeback. Just a quiet, almost brutal reminder that momentum in this sport is borrowed, never owned. There's no quote from her about that loss that meets the standard of verified, on-record reporting, so we're not going to manufacture one here, because the absence of a quote tells its own story. Sometimes silence after a loss says more than any sentence could. Now here's where you need to sit back and really feel the weight of what just happened across these 10 months, because this is the part of the story most people scroll past without registering its significance. A magazine took a chance on a player before she'd won anything. That player went on a tear, won a title, climbed the rankings, became a source of national pride for an entire country that had never had a tennis star like this before, and then got knocked out in straight sets just days later. The cover did not protect her. It never could. A photograph cannot win a match for you. It cannot soften a Tuesday afternoon collapse on a grass court in London. What the cover did was something different, something almost more interesting. It didn't shield her from failure. It just made the failure visible to a much larger audience than it would have reached otherwise. That's the real risk a cover like this carries, and it's the part nobody talks about when they celebrate these moments. The spotlight doesn't dim when you lose, it just keeps burning. Let's pull back even further, because there's a layer to this story that goes beyond Alex herself, and it involves a name you might not expect to hear in a tennis story. Barbora Krejcikova, the 2024 Wimbledon champion, faced Alex in July of 2025, a full month before that cover ever existed. And afterward, Krejcikova said something that in hindsight lines up almost eerily with what the magazine apparently sensed around the same time. She said Alex was smashing the ball, cleaning the lines, and called her, in her own words, the next generation, predicting she'd be really good in a couple of years. Think about what that means. A reigning Wimbledon champion and a deputy digital editor at a society magazine, two people working in completely different worlds, with completely different incentives, looking at the same young player within weeks of each other and arriving at the exact same conclusion. That's not a coincidence you can wave away easily. That's two independent signals pointing at the same rising star before the rest of the world had caught on. And the woman who actually made the editorial call deserves her own moment here, because this wasn't some faceless corporate decision buried in a meeting room. The piece was written by Emily Burke, Town & Country's deputy digital editor, and on the day the cover went live, she posted on her own Instagram, in her own words, calling it a dream to write her second digital cover story for the magazine, and have it be their first tennis digital cover ever. That's not a press release dressed up in corporate language. That's a person telling her own followers, in real time, exactly what she believed she'd just done. She wasn't hedging, she was naming it. A first. A category being opened. And when you place her words next to Krejcikova's words from the locker room side of the sport, you get this strange, almost cinematic moment where two completely different vantage points, the editorial world and the competitive world, converge on the same 20-year-old at almost the exact same time. Now widen the lens one more time, because Alex isn't actually standing alone in this story, even though it might feel that way. Town & Country had already run a feature on IGA Swiatek back in 2024. They covered Mira Andreeva's French Open run in 2026. They returned to Alex again in March with that Indian Wells follow-up. What you're looking at when you step back far enough is a magazine quietly assembling its own tennis canon in real time, choosing which names get to define the next era of the sport in the eyes of a non-sports audience, the fashion world, the philanthropy world, the world that doesn't watch tennis, but absolutely watches who's wearing what on a magazine cover. And inside that quiet canon, Alex isn't trailing behind. She's one of the names actively shaping it. But here's where the story turns from impressive to genuinely historic, and it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention. No Filipino tennis player, man or woman, had ever held a digital cover at this tier of American luxury media before this moment. Not one. So when this cover dropped, Filipino outlets back home didn't cover it like a sports headline buried on page 6. They covered it like a cultural event. National pride wrapped around a single photograph. And on Alex's own Instagram post about the cover, the likes pushed past 52,000, with comments flooding in from her countrymen all over the world, people who had never followed tennis closely in their lives, suddenly paying attention because someone who looked like them, who came from where they came from, was standing on a masthead that had spent 180 years almost exclusively reflecting a completely different kind of face back at its readers. That's the part of this story that the scoreboard will never capture. You can lose a match in straight sets and still permanently change what an entire community believes is possible for someone who looks like them. So where does that leave us, sitting here 10 months after a photograph was taken in Madrid? The Queen's Club loss is real. It happened. It wasn't erased or softened by anything that came before it. The cover never promised her wins, and it certainly never promised her comfort. What it did was something quieter and arguably more powerful. It told an entire audience, before the proof existed, that this was a face worth remembering. And then, slowly, painfully, gloriously, she went out and gave them reasons to actually remember it. A round of 16 at Indian Wells, a final at Eastbourne, a maiden title in Birmingham on a surface she'd never conquered before, a career-high ranking, and yes, a brutal straight sets exit just days later. Because that's what this sport does. It never lets anyone stay comfortable for long. There's a tournament reportedly waiting for her in Bad Homburg next week, and Wimbledon arrives the week after that. If her ranking holds, she'll be seated at a Grand Slam for the very first time in her career. Which means the story you just watched isn't actually finished. It's not a closed loop with a tidy bow on top. It's a chapter break in something still being written in real time, and the next page hasn't been printed yet. So look at that photograph one more time, the denim shirt, the tilted hat, the Madrid light, the masthead of a magazine that had survived 180 years without ever once doing this before. It wasn't a coronation, Nobody crowned her that day. It was an introduction, nothing more, nothing less. A single frozen frame that happened to land 10 months before the world had enough evidence to agree with it. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with longest. The idea that sometimes belief arrives before proof, that sometimes someone sees the ending of your story before you've even written the middle, and the only thing left to decide is whether you're going to spend the next 10 months making them right.